Welcome everybody to week 5 of our UTS Accounting Discipline Group weekly show. Today we are going remote because of the heavy rain weather in Sydney. I'm in an area where we're on a evacuation alert, so I'm working from home today, and Nelson is at the office. So Nelson, are you staying nice and dry?
Yes, got my umbrella in the background. I'll be in the office all day, so yeah.
Excellent. So today we have a really interesting story for you about Airtasker.
Yes.
So Nelson, it's raining, it's terrible weather here, and you don't have anywhere to dry laundry, right? You don't have one of those clothes horses, your dryer is broken. So you need someone to dry your clothes. What do you do?
Well, you can put up a job on Airtasker. So it's a really great platform where you can basically ask for anything that's legal. Right? If you need someone to do your accounts, if you find a spider in your bed that's a little too big for you to
Need
deal
someone
with,
to, put some flat pack furniture together,
all that
not
sort of thing.
to do your university homework. So you should not be asking for assistance with assignments
Absolutely.
on Airtasker. But Nelson, what's happening with Airtasker right now?
So Airtasker is planning an IPO in Australia. So basically, they want to be listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and there's a lot of buzz around it because they're talking about Airtasker as having the same similar potential to Uber in terms of its potential market share and the opportunities available to the company.
And for students who don't know what an IPO is, an IPO is an initial public offering. So it's that time where we take a company from being privately owned, probably by employees and the founders, and we're offering shares. Now, Nelson, from I guess the accounting angle here, when you do your second semester accounting subject, you learn about creating the process for share issues.
Yep.
And students who have been through that will remember that there are 3 stages. There's a call. Is that right?
It
There's a
starts with
call for
application,
applications.
then there's the allotment of shares, and then there's the subsequent call for the final payment.
All right. And so once then we have a whole lot of shareholders, but
Yep.
before then we have to have this IPO,
Yep.
and Airtasker and any other company that wants to IPO has to put together a whole lot of information, accounting information as well as non-accounting information. But what does the accounting information tell us if I'm a prospective shareholder?
Well, I guess when they're a really small company and likely not profitable, not a lot, to be honest. I feel like when you're looking at the accounting, it's not big. When we use evaluation, we're using it to predict the future. But in many cases, this accounting is still for a very small firm that's growing. It's, pushing all their money back into the business. So you're kind of needing to adjust the numbers for the expectation of substantial growth in the future. So I think that's kind of the way of using the accounting number, is to really sort of view it as a very, okay, this is the minimum starting point, and from there it's going to get a lot better.
Now, you mentioned before Uber.
Yeah.
And for those people, I think most people have been in an Uber at some point. What's the difference between Airtasker and Uber then? They're both online platforms where people can book a service that's on offer.
Mhm. Yeah. So in contrast to Uber, Airtasker allows you know anyone to go on and post a job that they want to do. So whereas Uber is specifically focused on driving, right?
And they can set their own prices, right? So if I
And they
wanted
can set
someone
their
to
own
come
price.
and, put some IKEA together, for
Yeah,
example,
exactly.
flat pack furniture, you would set the price.
Yeah. So basically, the person that wants the job done will offer a price, and the other person can then counter it and make another offer. And some of you may have seen in the news recently that in the UK, it was determined that by the UK courts that Uber, well, their drivers are actually employees. So they're
And that's
entitled.
really interesting because right now they're contractors here in
Yeah, in
Australia.
Australia, the contractors, because we have different case law in place. But they are considered employees in the UK, which means they're entitled to sick leave, superannuation, that kind of stuff. And so the thing about Airtasker is that their contractors technically aren't considered employees, and the big difference between the two came down into the case in the UK, where they said, well, because Uber can set how much their drivers are being paid, therefore they're employees. Whereas in Australia, with Airtasker specifically at this point, you can basically set your own price, right?
That's pretty
Independent
good. That's an interesting difference. And for me as an auditor and as someone who looks at risks and controls, that means there need to be really strong systems in place to make sure that we capture all of the, job ads, and then how much, which job ads get taken up, Airtasker advertisements, the commissions, and that might also help us with predicting revenue.
Yeah.
So if you're working in the firm, or if you're looking at valuing this firm, you'd be looking at what are the sorts of things that are on offer. And certainly in wet weather, it might be, hey, does anyone want to hire out my tumble dryer right now if you don't have one at home? Yeah. Close to Christmas, around, I've seen in a weekly online newsletter for my area, which is the northwest of Sydney, there is a guy who makes a huge amount of money putting together trampolines just before Christmas. These, fancy, well, trampolines are really different now than when I was a kid. They're like these circular things with big sides so that you can't just bounce off.
Yeah, the sides didn't exist when I had trampolines.
There was no safety.
There was no safety.
And even worse if you got caught in the springs down the side. But he makes a ton of money on Airtasker from simply putting together trampolines as Christmas gifts for different families. Yeah. So it really creates an interesting case that we should watch in the future. Now, it's week 5, which means we are 42% or 41.6% repeater. So almost 42% through the term. And it's assignment time.
It's assignment time.
So what should you be looking for to figure out, how do I do my assignment well? That's a question I get from students all the time. I've got an assignment, and I get it over Instagram and Facebook as well. I've got this assignment. How do I do a good job of it?
Yes. Well, we've had a chat about this before, right? Prior to the show, and we'd see it this way. Well, how would you do well in a job interview? Well,
you'd have to look at what the job interview asks. Candidates can do these 5 things or 10 things, and you match yourself against those.
And what is that contained in an assignment?
Well, in the assignment, I think it's contained in something that you'll often see called your marking rubric or your assessment criteria. So best practice at UTS is that you have your assignment brief, which says, here's what you have to do. Here are the learning objectives of that assignment. Here's how to submit it. But there should be a table, and that table contains the marking rubric. And Nelson, what does the marking, well, it says the criteria, but how do you know, if what you're doing is good or bad or really good?
Well, it will assign criteria, or what kind of criteria you met in order to get each grade. So it will tell you, okay, well, if you failed, these are the things you did or didn't do. And if you get a pass or a credit, you did these things well, but to this certain level, and where if you get a distinction or high distinction, you did these things to a great extent and you're super detailed. So you can kind of see that across each level. So you'll even know what mark you get based on the amount of effort you'll put.
And this is really useful because if you've got many assignments and you're trying to think, how much work do I need to put in? And there were no assignment rubrics when I was a student. You just worked your ass off and you hoped that you got a good grade. But now you can see, if I want to get a credit, this is where I need to be. And if I want to get a high distinction, which I was a nerd, so I was always trying to go for high distinctions, this is what you need to do. Yes. And then when you get your mark back, it should reflect your performance on those different criteria.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, with this, can you actually use it before you hand in your assignment to be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'd be able to access it before you hand in your assignment, so you can see what criteria you think you're meeting or not meeting, and you can use that as a really good sort of basis to then look for feedback. Send it to your peer review, ask some of your friends in your classes, or even
it could be a swap.
Yeah.
Right. So swap an assignment with someone else that you trust and that and you say, hey, can we peer review each other's?
Yeah.
And then that process of learning how to look at someone else's work against the criteria also helps you better understand, this is what this could mean. Yeah. And sometimes even your academics might give you some exemplars. So they might say, here is an example of a pass. Here is an example of a distinction. Here is an example of a fail. So that you also have some ideas. They might not always have those reference samples, but in some different subjects, they may have one, and it can be really helpful. Now, this rubric should also come back to you. So once you have your assignment marked, it should come back saying, here are the things you did right. Often it'll be, on paper, we used to just circle on sheets and you'd get that cover sheet back, but you might get that on Canvas where there's a type of grading rubric that they can use where you can see where you went wrong. And that's also really important that you take into account feedback. So we don't just set assignments because we want you to do them. We set assignments because they're about helping you demonstrate certain learning objectives, that you're meeting certain requirements for the subject. And feedback is really important because if you're not taking what you did wrong, where you could improve, then you're not going to take advantage of doing that better for the final or improving that skill so that you can be better in another subject that might follow on from this one. So being aware of the rubric and then asking for feedback and taking advantage of that feedback is really important. And if the feedback's not clear, what do? You get your feedback and you go, I'm not sure what this means. What is your best option as a student?
Well, if you need I guess before you submit this, if you need additional help, there's always a subject corner. You can ask them, or you can go to UPass or potentially helps. So they're all options that you can sort of reach out to.
And helps are also our higher education language and learning service. So they help with assignment writing, with referencing. So if you're not feeling comfortable going to your tutor or your subject coordinator to talk about the assessment criteria in the rubric, you can take it to helps. And they do classes and they do one-on-one consultations as well. If you do need a one-on-one consultation with helps, book one sooner rather than later, because they do tend to get really, really busy at this time of year. The one thing I want to recommend to everybody is don't fall into the trap of going to Chegg or one of these other sites and perhaps copying something or paying somebody to write your assignment. Number one, that doesn't help you learn anything. And number two, we do a lot of plagiarism and a detection type of work. And if your tutor doesn't think the work is your own, they may ask you, like, where did this come from? What are you saying here? And a lot of times these assignments that you pay for just don't actually answer the question. There are a lot of waffle that don't make sense that aren't going to get you a good grade anyway. If you are feeling under pressure and you're running out of time, then the best thing to do is to go talk to your coordinator. Right? There is usually a policy to submit an assignment late, to get some assistance. If other factors have been impacting your ability to prepare for an assignment, you might be able to apply for special consideration as well. But it is always better to ask us for help than think, oh, I'll just buy something from somewhere, or I'll, friend's given me an old assignment that I can use. That's always better to get help than to risk academic misconduct, because that'll go on your permanent university record as well. And there can be far-reaching consequences for that. Awesome. Any last words for this week, Nelson?
Stay dry.
Yes, if you are in a flood area and you can't come to class, I'm sure your academics will be fine. We're just saying, write them a message and they might be able to provide you with an alternative online time that you can come to as well, because we know lots of places, especially in the West, out where I am, are cut off from going anywhere. So we are very understanding. And if you do need some help, just reach out to us at UTS.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy week 5. Next week, we will be at the official halfway point of the term, and which also means we're going to have public holidays, study break week. Next week, we're going to talk about what you should be doing in the study break. So have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next time.